Good afternoon, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order and ask for any declaration of conflict of interest. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes from the previous meeting? Any errors or omissions or questions? If not, I'll need a mover and a seconder. You do. We'll now start the meeting. Notice of public hearing for application for minor variance file A03-23. A&J Stratman Family Unlimited, Warwick Concession 2, SER Part Lot 13, 7318 Zion Line, to construct a manure pit pad which has runoff into an existing circular pit. The proposed manure pad necessitates variances related to regulations associated with the minimum distance separation calculations, but more specifically, the proposed manure pad would result in a setback to the nearest lot line of 30 feet. This does not meet the required setback to the nearest lot line of 89 feet as per minimum distance separation calculations. Take notice that an application under the above file will be heard by the Committee of Adjustment on September 5th, 2023 at 4 p.m. at the Warwick Township Municipal Office. Any person may attend in the public hearing and or make written or oral representation either in support or opposition to the proposed minor variance. Can I have the secretary read the dates and places of notice of public meeting?
Notices were sent by regular mail and posted on the property on August 16th, 2023.
Also ask the secretary to read letters of submissions supporting or opposing the application.
There were none received.
Thank you. I want to ask the planner to explain the planner's report.
To the chair. Good afternoon, respected chair, committee members, and the viewing public. My name is Johan. I'm a member of the planning team. This is a presentation for application number A03-2023 for a minor variance. Has the slide started? Yeah. All right, the next slide, please. The applicants are A&J Stratman and Family Limited. John Stratman is the agent. The location is 7318 Zion Line. The proposal is for a minor variance for MDS required setbacks to the nearest lot line for the construction of a manure pad, which has runoff into an existing circular pit. So what's proposed is 30 feet, but what's required by the MDS calculations is 89 feet. Next slide, please. So this is a site photo taken from the road towards 7318 Zion Line. As can be seen from the photo, there is a single detached residence to the left, and the rest are agricultural based buildings. On the right, we see a lot of grain silos. Behind that, there's an existing manure pad. Then there's a circular manure pad behind that. And then the proposed pad is behind that. Next slide. This is from the road to the property to the east of the property. This minor variance has a future potential to impact any residential development on this property. Next slide, please. This is the existing manure bunker behind the grain silos that we saw before. Next slide. This is a circular runoff pit that we've been talking about. This is directly behind that manure bunker that we just saw. The next slide. This is where the proposed manure storage pad is going to be. So this is right behind the circular pit that we just saw. As you can see, there's a slight gradient to the pit, and that's intended to run for water runoff into the circular pit. As can be seen from this picture, when planning staff did our site visit, work had begun on the pad. Building services was notified and a stop order was commissioned the day after the site visit was happened, after the site visit happened to stop all work, further work. Any further work requires a permit. Next slide, please. So this is the site location and zoning. The zoning is zoned A1 agricultural. The proposed manure pit is an accepted use on this land. Next slide. Here is a zoomed in view of what we're talking about. So we have the proposed manure pad and the site setback where 30 feet is proposed, but 27 meters is what is required. So 27 meters is 89 feet. Next slide. The minor variance proposal is consistent with county and Warwick official plans. So according to the official plans, every proposal needs to meet MDS, but exceptions are granted in the case of minor variances. This proposal is not consistent with the Planning Act, provincial policy statement, and the zoning bylaw. These legislations are quite clear that MDS regulations must be followed. The application does not meet the 4 tests of a minor variance. The variance is not minor, it fails the zoning bylaw intent, and is not desirable for the appropriate development or use of land, building, or structure. I'll explain this further on the next slide. So what you see from this map is the existing conditions where MDS is concerned. So for the existing conditions, a MDS of 272 meters is what is required to the surrounding residential, so surrounding houses. That is provided with existing conditions. The problem is the property right east of the subject lands. This property is amalgamated with a property further east, that dairy farm and the house that's there. There is a potential risk if that land is severed off and if it's severed off, sold, and residential comes there. If this variance is granted, there would be significant risks, impacts on that residential. Yep, and the final slide. So because other options were granted to the applicant, the other options were to move the pad or to change the configuration of the pad in some way to reduce or to alleviate the variance. This was not pursued. Instead, they went straight for the minor variance. And because of all the other reasons mentioned, it is the recommendation of planning staff that Warwick Township Committee of Adjustment deny the minor variance application A03-2023 at 7138 Zion Line to allow the construction of a manure storage pad 9.1 meters from the nearest lot line. There are alternate options. If the committee is prepared to support the variance, then committee will need to provide reasons for its decision as per the Planning Act, including how the proposal meets the 4 tests in the official plan. Planning staff also recommends that any approval of a variance be subject to the following conditions: that any further changes will require a new variance. For example, if livestock on the property changes, a new variance may be required since there's no livestock on the property. This could be if the manure type changes, a new variance will be required. With that, I end my presentation and I open the floor to questions.
Thank you. I'll now have John say anything if he wants, or comments, or can you sit up? Can you sit up and here and push the microphone so we can hear you?
And yes, I can if you direct me accordingly.
Yes, if you could go back to the overhead zoomed in site plan. Yes. So I guess, first of all, we're not increasing we're not producing more manure, or I'm not producing any manure. I am literally just storing manure in a timely manner to be able to manage it and apply it to our farmland. The existing dry manure storage and the existing liquid manure storage, that was built in 1992, I believe. Under the environmental farm plan, we received grant money for that, and that was to follow the best nutrient management plans, nutrient management recommendations at the time. Back then, we also had cattle in the existing barns in front of that shed. And the liquid manure runoff was, that storage was used to contain all of that runoff from the outdoor feedlots. So since then, we do not have cattle anymore. Those existing sheds have been converted to storage. And the existing liquid manure storage is only being used for the existing dry manure bunker. So it made perfect sense to me to put the proposed manure pad so that it's attached to the existing storage. My engineer, when he came to the site, he said that more farmers should be considering putting in liquid runoff storage for their outdoor pads. I'm talking to other farmers too, then it can get quite messy. To move the manure pad, I still wouldn't be able to have it connect to the existing storage if I changed the shape of it or change the angle. It just didn't make sense to consider moving it. Or I would still fall within, I still wouldn't meet the requirements for the minimum distance. The proposed area for the pad is on higher ground, so it naturally slopes to the manure bunker only at the very top right corner. So the blue square area that you see. So it's called a sand knoll, if understand any farming terms. But as you go to the left or to the west, the grade falls a fair amount. So in preparing the site for what you saw in the picture, and there was no intention on pouring any concrete until we had a permit. We had to move considerable sand fill in there to get the proper grade to the liquid storage. In this particular photo, it doesn't show the addition that we put on to the existing shed. So the big shed to the west, that just got finished last week. They poured the concrete, the concrete floor. So the intention was to have the addition for the shed, the proposed manure bunker, and then to increase my yard space. Equipment keeps getting bigger. Kids don't like backing up wagons into sheds and turning around. So to create some more yard area where it was easier at harvest time for unloading wagons into the existing grain storages that you see there as well. To move the pad to another site, I guess I did consider that at one time years ago, but I didn't have the liquid storage that I do have at home. As far as somebody building on the property beside us, I have the existing storage and manure pit. I don't know where they can build where they would be any farther away from that storage than what I'm proposing. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, so again, my engineer, he was quite happy to see that I was tying it in with the existing storage. And again, I'm not increasing my volume of manure. I'm just trying to, in 1919, we had rain all spring and no crop got planted until the first week of June. That was the first year I remember not being able to apply any manure in the spring. So this would very much help in a situation like that, even in the fall as well.
You want to turn your mic off, John? Thank you. Is there anyone in attendance that has any questions or comments? Go ahead.
I guess just to clarify, so to move the existing, sorry, to move the proposed manure pad to the left would be cost prohibitive because of the lay of the land and because of the existing or the addition to the existing shed. And then moving it farther back, well, I would still be too close to the lot line, so therefore the minor variance. They were concerned about municipal drain in behind the proposed pad. It was required to be 9 meters from the edge of the pad. I dug that up, and Matt was over this morning to verify that it's 42 meters away.
Thank you. Johan, you got a comment?
Through the chair. Just a clarification. When the MDS calculation was done, we did take into consideration that the circular pit, it's not going to be used for manure and it's just going to be used for runoff. From an MDS perspective, so I understand you're not increasing the amount of manure, but from an MDS perspective, they do it based on the capacity, the size of the pad, right? So you have the existing pad and then you have such a large pad. So MDS makes an assumption that you may in the future expand and have more manure. So that assumption is actually built into the calculation. It's not something we can get away from, but that is a part of the MDS calculations. Regarding the municipal drain, thank you for confirming where it was, but that you still have leeway there between the 9 meters and the 40.
Sorry,
You have leeway there to move the pad between the 9 and the 40.
where do I move it?
So you mentioned that the drain is 40 meters away.
Meters away
Are you able to move it closer?
to the municipal drain.
Yeah. So the requirement is just being 9 meters away.
But then I would be. So you to move the manure pad closer to the municipal drain.
Through your chair, it's all right if you're 9 meters away.
Okay, but I still need to, but then you still want me to move an additional 60 feet over. So farther back and over. And then, but then I'm running downhill on the backside of that same wall I was telling you about. So again, it would require more excavating, more sand fill, and then a connection to the existing pit, runoff pit.
Through your chair. Yes, if it's possible, I know it sounds expensive, but if it's possible, that would be the way that we would recommend. It doesn't have to be a connection to an existing pit. It could be the creation of a new pit.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anyone here that has any other questions?
I have a question, John. Okay.
Gonna get to you.
Okay.
Anybody on the committee have questions? Go ahead, John.
Okay, so my question is for Johan. What I don't understand is that we can't have a new proposed manure pad because of the possibility of a residential, obviously a house being built on the farm to the east. But there's already an existing manure pit and bunker for holding manure that's even closer. So I don't see where that really is a problem as far as building a house, because the house would already have to be, according to the MDS, a certain distance away from that manure pit anyway. So proposed pad would actually be farther away from the house. Can you explain why a proposed manure pit in this spot would be a problem for a residential?
Luis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Cam Alonso, Manager of Planning and Development for the county. One of the things to keep in mind through you, Mr. Chair, is that oftentimes what happens is certain things will get built at certain times and regulations change. So chances are the existing pit was built prior to the MDS regulations becoming what they are today. And so, like all planning regulations, they don't go backwards. So what that means is that you build something, the rules change, you are, in essence, to use the typical term, grandfathered, because the rules have changed or new rules have come in place that weren't there before. What is important to keep in mind is that MDS is what I like to term an elastic rule. And what that means is that it applies not just to farming uses, but it applies to residential uses. So as residential uses on parcels right now that are purely agriculture, but could potentially have another dwelling pop up, there's implications to farm uses that are creating these situations where MDS kicks in, where you have manure storage. Conversely, you may not have any residential nearby, and these uses that create manure or odor issues start to expand. They will start to push the potential of residential uses away because of them. It's a reciprocal rule. So hence why it's elastic. The more agricultural intensification you get with noxious odor and manure storage, the more the MDS increases, which then pushes residential away. What we're saying to you at this point is that while there's no residential that may exist there, the whole point of planning is to think about the future. And the whole reason that the MDS is written the way it is that it's elastic. So it's, as you increase these things, as you increase manure storage or relocate it, it changes the nature of the calculation. It changes the impacts and implications on surrounding land uses.
Thank you. Any other committee members have questions?
Through the chair, just adding to what Ken is saying, in this scenario, when you're adding an additional manure pad there, from an MDS perspective, you're actually increasing capacity. So it is the potential capacity for the amount of manure that can be there. So when you're put that new pad, that increases the distances. Also, we have to look at, there's MDS2 and there's MDS1. MDS2 is for agricultural based stuff, livestock, right? They have a set of standards. So in this case, the manure pad has a set of standards. Small variances, but this is not a small variances, but small variances for MDS2 can amount to very large differences, large impacts on MDS1, which is for houses. Houses has a very different, residential has a very different standard. It's far more restrictive than a manure pad or livestock. So if we're making small changes here, the changes for future residential is actually quite large.
Thank you. John?
Are we talking about one house, or like you talk about future residential? You're talking about one house, correct?
Through the chair, ideally, yes.
And if I did not build this additional pad, what about my existing storage? How does that play into effect with someone wanting to build a home, a house on the east property? How does that tie in?
So through the chair, there would still be MD's considerations here. There would still be noxious odors and the like, but you get a much larger set of conditions to play around with, where they place the house, how much smell that they actually get, etc. If there is an additional pad there, the assumption is that there's going to be more manure. That's the MDS assumption, even though that you're saying that's not going to be the case. The MDS assumption is that there's going to be more manure, and this increases the amount of smell. And the reason for MDS is to reduce complaints against smell, right? It's to reduce complaints between incompatible uses, things like livestock versus residential, right?
Anybody else in the committee have questions for John? I guess I have a question. If you were to build a new pad, you're probably not going to use the old pad anymore.
I would use the new one first, that's for sure. With larger equipment, I'm able to access my existing one. I can access it, no problem. If I get somebody else to do it, I'm not going to mention any of my kids. But I do drive through the barn that's marked A1, or it has the A1 on it. So I drive through that barn. The doors are 12.5 feet wide. I'm just under 12 feet wide with my tractor. So I drive through there and I do a 3-point turn each time to get positioned for loading, or I drive in and back in to dump into my existing storage. So I would definitely be using my new pit first. It's farther away from my house, so for flies and so on, then it would be nicer for my personal residence as well. But like I said, in the case like 1919, where we had the very wet spring and we could have a very, very wet fall, and I don't want to run into not having enough storage. Where if I was really stuck, I could store manure on the existing yard pad, which is in front of the existing dry storage. That's all concrete. It's all sloped towards my existing runoff pit, so everything would still be contained, and it would just make it harder again to be able to unload and to load. So financially, I'm able to do this just to make it a little bit easier for myself as well.
I have one other question to the planners. Did you do an actual MDS1 calculation from the existing pad to the far side of that property? Because I'm pretty sure nobody be able to build a house there anyway. based on my experience with MDS calculations, but I don't know if you ran one or not.
To the chair, we didn't run an MDS calculation, but according to the zoning bylaw, it'll have to be at least 300 meters away. There is space on the property to put houses, because it's quite a large property as a result.
Okay, thank you. Just by looking at this map, I don't think it would happen because it's 430 meters from the pad to the dairy farm to the east, which is in the middle of the farm. So just a comment on my part. John, do you have any other questions? If I may? John, did you have any other questions? Ruth?
Yeah, I do. So I'm glad you raised that point, John, because I was looking at this the other day, and I don't see where there's a spot to build a house on the next door farm if you do the measurements from the Kingma place and the John Stratman's place. I don't see where there's a place to build a house on that farm, and I think that that's important to look at that. That there may not be an opportunity for anyone to ever build there as it is without another storage pad, but maybe I did the calculations wrong. Yeah, that if you look at that, there's not much of a spot to build a house there. That's just a comment I had.
Okay, thank you, John.
Through the chair, as part of our review, we did look at a 300-meter radius from the proposed pad, and there was quite a bit of the property in which you could actually build a house.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from anyone?
Actually, Mr. Chair, I'll make this brief. Really, what committee needs to weigh is what the potential risks are versus the variance that's before you, and determine what actually wins out the day in terms of your risk management.
Thank you. I guess I only have one more comment. Sometimes I know we got to follow provincial policy, but sometimes common sense prevails in my eyes. And that's just a comment from me. Go ahead.
So with the recent storm, the municipal drain that was in question, I had it dug up prior to the storm, and now I have to bring a bucket load of topsoil there to fill in the hole because it all got washed away. But the talking about the property and where would you build a house? Well, you're not going to build it any farther back because that whole low run was filled with water from the storm. And you can see the very, very dark soil there. That is all, it's almost like bogland muck soil. The house that we built, we did slab on grade, so we were not affected by the storm.
Okay, thank you. As there are no further questions, the committee hereby closes the portion of the meeting. Notice of decision will be mailed out within 10 days from the date of the committee's decision. The appeal period is 20 days after the date of the decision is mailed. After that date, if there are no appeals filed, then the application becomes final and the property owner will be sent a notice. Thanks everyone for attending. Now I'll ask the committee to make a decision.
I just wanted to make a comment, John.
Go ahead.
Before we vote, I don't feel comfortable voting right at this time, but I will vote if I have to. But I would like to to walk the site to get a better handle on this, especially the part about the house. I just don't think that we can support this application based on all the rules, but at the same time, I agree with what you said, that common sense prevails, that this would be the proper place for that manure storage pad. So I'm a little torn as to what to do here, to be honest with you. Maybe can Ken Melanson give us a little bit of, like, if we vote to say that he can go ahead and build this storage pad, that's against what the county's recommending, what would be the next step?
You repeat that, John? I didn't hear the last part.
Okay, so if we vote as a committee to let John and Annalee go ahead and build this storage pad, what will be the next step as far as the county goes?
So I'll ask you that question.
So through you, Mr. Chair, you have a variance request before you. Committee has received the planner's report and the planner is recommending refusal or denial. You have the ability to make a decision to approve it. Per section 45 of the Planning Act, you need to give reasons why. And you need to give reasons why the minor variance meets the tests, in your opinion. Doesn't have to be overly dramatic, but you need to provide those reasons. The appeal period is also for the ministry to make a decision if it wants to appeal. So the ministry needs to also receive the notice. I can't speak for the ministry as to whether or not they would appeal. The MDS is their regulation, so that is a risk. But to what the next step would be is, once the minor variance was granted, then my understanding would be that the order would be lifted. They would be issued a building permit for the pad or for the manure storage, and they would be allowed to proceed. There's no further planning approvals that are necessary to my knowledge. Yes, and as Amanda points out, there is the appeal period that has to cease, and there has to be a notice issued that there were no appeals. Presuming that occurs, then the order would be lifted, there would be a building permit issued, and they would be able to proceed.
That answer your question, John?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. That's good.
Anybody else, Rob?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I understand what you had said earlier, but through all this whole process of approving a variance, it's not really a minor variance in my view. It's more than a minor. You're going from, what is it? 30 to 90. Yeah, 30 to 90 feet. That's more than a minor variance. And I remember sitting here and planners saying that that's one of the things we have to look at. Is it minor or not? I'm not disagreeing with what Mr. Stratton's trying to do. That's admirable, but that part of it, and then what you had mentioned, where we're going to put a house, I'd like to see a little more information. Agree with John. I feel torn here. Sorry.
Dave?
Yeah, I'm just thinking the same way. Like you suggested, moving it back, you can go within, was it 9 meters of the drainage? And you don't necessarily have to move it over the 89 feet. You could move it like halfway maybe, and apply for another minor, that may be considered a minor variance then, which the distance from like the 90 or 89 feet or whatever it is to 30 is quite a distance for be considered a minor variance.
If I move it back, how do I access it?
Yeah, like I say, if we had a site visit, maybe, I don't know if it.
I'm perfectly fine with
Mhm.
you all coming to have a meeting, so that's not a problem at all.
And I think this variance is more for the side lot line, correct? Than anything else?
I'd have to have, through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd have to have Johan confirm that, but I think that is correct.
Yep, that's what the variance is.
So moving it back, from my understanding, doesn't change anything. It's really the side lot line that's the
Yes.
issue, so.
Yeah.
What I was going to suggest, Mr. Chairman, as committee will recall, when we gave you some guidance and educational training about the planning process, committee always has 3 options available to you. You can approve the requested application and that is with or without conditions. You can deny the application with reasons. The third is you can table the application or delay it. When you table an application, you should table it in terms of seeking specific information or for a specific reason. From a Planning Act perspective, to table it to do a site visit, there isn't really a requirement under the act for you to do that. But that said, committee has some pretty broad powers. I'm not going to argue with you. If you wanted more information in terms of the analysis that Johan did in terms of where a house could sit on that parcel, that's another thing that we could provide. But I just want committee to understand that you have three doors that you can pick from.
If we were to table it, is there a deadline on how many days we can do that, Ken? That was my next question to you.
So through the chair, the one thing to keep in mind is that there are time specific requirements under the act. Quite frankly, it doesn't allow you to really table an application, but those are specific to an applicant. If they want to take a matter to the OLT for a lack of a decision, that's their choice. That comes with the opposite, or with the challenge that OLT is backlogged. So I doubt that would happen. But there wouldn't, I don't think that you would be in a position that there would be any further requirement for notice, because you've held the required public meeting, you've met the statutory obligations already. I would even say that I'll give you a hypothetical. If you were to table the matter to do a site visit, for instance, and then somehow a revised application was suddenly considered, depending on how revised it would be, I doubt we would even need to recirculate it, because it would be less than what was already being asked for. And there's a legal principle about, if you ask for something this big, but then you suddenly contract it down to this big, you've already over asked. It's not a big deal. It's, are you going beyond what you've asked for? That would then probably need re-advertising and recirculation. This would be a situation where you'd be reducing the ask. So those are a couple of options for you to consider.
Thank you, Ken. Anybody else?
Yeah, Chairman John, I have one more quick question for Ken, if I can. My question is, when would it be, like, we're at 10 meters right now and the county is saying that's not a minor variance. How far would the proposed pad have to be moved before the county would say, okay, the committee should pass it? I have no objection.
So through the chair, as you know, we often say that there is no definition of a minor variance. It really does come down to what is the impact and what is the risk. How do you manage the risk of those impacts? So I'll give you an example. If I was to propose an apartment, in my house, but I didn't have room for the one parking stall that's required above what I need for my house, I could come and apply to the township and ask for a variance to that. Well, if the requirement is one stall and I'm asking for that variance, that's 100%. So numerically it's significant, but if there was a good reason why I couldn't provide that and I could provide an alternative, or there was some other alternative that offsets that, it could be deemed to be minor despite the fact it's 100%. So it really just depends on the risk profile and how much risk you're willing to tolerate. Hence why we have an alternative option for you, that if you were of the mindset that you wanted to approve the variance, there's conditions that you could consider. It really comes down to what committee feels is the best way to manage the risk going forward.
Thank you, Ken. Need a decision or motion of some sort?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion. We table it this application until we do a site visit.
Motion by Dave, seconded by Rob. All in favor? Sorry.
Can I just, through you, Mr. Chair, suggest that it return to the next possible meeting? So depending on when you get your site visit scheduled, we would then get it on to the next available meeting. I just don't want it to be hanging out there with no action. If that makes sense.
I'll wait till Amanda has the motion before I read it. When we finally vote on. Go ahead.
So.
It's 20 days from the final decision. So if we wait on this to the next meeting, which is usually the first Tuesday of the month, then it will be 20 days after that, John.
Okay, so sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, for John joining us on Zoom. The rough, very quick motion on the table is that application A03 2023 be tabled until the October Committee of Adjustment meeting to allow for a site visit to be conducted on the property by committee members, as well as planning to provide additional information on the adjacent parcel for residential use location or similar.
Everybody understand that? All those in favor? Carried. Close this portion of this meeting. Thank you for all coming. We'll move into our second meeting.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for your patience. Notice of public hearing for the applications for minor variance file A-04-23, April Sue Macbeth, Plan 7, Lot 20, Lot 247, 574 Ontario Street. To convert garage and portion of the house into a granny suite additional dwelling unit. The proposed additional dwelling unit would result in an inner yard setback to approximately 4.5 feet, 1.4 meters. This does not meet the required interior yard setback of 3 meters in the residential R1 zone. Take notice that the application on the above file will be heard by the Committee of Adjustment on September 5th, 2023 at 4 p.m. Any person may attend the public hearing and or make written oral representation either in support or in opposition of the proposed minor variance. The meeting will take place in person at the Township Office, 5280 Nauvoo Road. I will now ask the Secretary for reading, or sorry, for the dates and place of notice.
Notices were sent by regular mail and posted on the property on August 16th, 2023.
Thank you. I will now ask Secretary to read letters of submissions of supporting or opposing the application.
Thank you. All comments received are included on the agenda as part of the planner's report for information.
Thank you. I will now ask Johan to do his planner's report.
Through your chair. This is a presentation for application number A04 2023 for a minor variance. Next slide, please.
Can you see that, John?
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay.
All right, next slide, please. This one back, yeah. All right. So the applicant is April Macbeth. The location is 574 Ontario Street. And the proposal is a minor variance to the required interior side yard setback to allow the conversion of the garage into an additional dwelling unit. The setback currently is 1.4 meters. What's required is 3 meters. So the increase, the reason for the increase is the garage is not habitable, right? So they allow lesser setbacks, but now since we're making it habitable because it's becoming an additional dwelling unit, the setback requirement increases. Next slide, please. So this is the house at 574 Ontario Street. This picture is taken from the road. So from the picture, you see the garage. That's where the additional dwelling unit is going to be. Next picture, please. So this is a picture taken right across the road. Next picture. So this is a picture of the garage wall, and this is the setback here, the property line, and the setback is 1.4 meters. This is where the variance is being requested. Next slide. This is a picture taken from the back of the garage to the property directly west. And as you can see, there's a bit of open space there. Next slide. This is a picture from the back of the garage area. As you can see, that area is being underutilized. That structure is being underutilized at the moment. Next slide. So the location is 574 Ontario Street. The zoning is R1 residential, and the zoning permits the additional dwelling unit. Next slide. This is a picture of the proposal, the variance. As you can see, what's existing right there is 1.4 meters, but 3 meters is what is required. Next slide. So this minor variance proposal is consistent with the Planning Act, provincial policy statement, county and Warwick official plans, and the zoning bylaw. This application meets the 4 tests of the minor variance as well. I'll explain that further in the next slide. This is a proposed floor plan. I'll flip the floor plan around so the writing looks upside down, but I kept this orientation to be in line with the orientation from all the previous pictures. So if you look at the west wall, what's being proposed, there's no windows there except for a window for the washroom. As such, this is a design consideration, and the variance is minor because there aren't any screening or privacy concerns. All the existing windows are in the front and back of the proposed unit. There is a requirement for a parking stall, and that is provided as well. Next slide. So it is our planning recommendation that the Warwick Township Committee of Adjustment approve the minor variance application A04-2023 at 574 Ontario Street to allow the conversion of the existing garage into an additional dwelling unit with a 1.4 meter interior yard setback. With this, I conclude the presentation, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Johan. April, do you have any comments or to make? If so, come up to a microphone, please.
So the reason that we want to do this is with the way housing is right now, my daughter and her kids and her husband have moved in with us. There are 9.5 of us in this house. We're sharing the downstairs bathroom with 3 preteen girls. It's really hard to get bathroom space. We have no privacy. They have no privacy. I'm getting older. I don't want to do stairs. So if we were able to do the granny suite we're using an existing room in the house, closing off the front kitchen entranceway onto the inside. So the door, I don't know if you guys pictures, anyways, the inside door that's right beside the garage is the main entrance. We would be blocking that off, putting a door into the living room and keeping the garage door, just making the garage our living room, bathroom, kitchen, and keeping the existing bedroom as a bedroom. To give us some privacy, to give them some privacy. There is no way she would be able to afford a house on her own. And it seems stupid to keep a 5-bedroom home for 2 people. So we're just hoping to be able to do this and live a little more apart, but still being together. We've been here since 2000. We love it here. I can't think of going anywhere else. So I'm just hoping that we can do so. Any questions for me?
Get to that.
Okay.
Is anyone in attendance have any questions or comments?
Right. We have a contractor to come in. I will have a plumber. I will have an electrician. I'm getting all permits. Yeah, no, it's not Dave. We will have contractors coming in and doing the work. We will be doing our own drywalling and stuff like that. I mean, that's really easy, but everything else will be done by a licensed person, and we're not changing the outside at all, except for removing garage doors and putting windows instead. Hopefully we're insulating the garage, so anybody who hears us yelling and screaming now will not hear us as much with the proper insulation. Yeah, everybody's going to be legal.
Because like, what does it do to our property tax? That we, done a lot of work on our house and spent thousands. And we don't want to see, run down piece of junk sitting there, just question. what's being done.
Yeah, no, like I said, we're not changing the outside. The front where the garage door is will be 2 small windows. The back door will have a patio door. 1 small bathroom window with, I want that glazed stuff so nobody can see in. So yeah, the outside shouldn't change. We do want to close in our side of the yard so that nobody can get out through that way. It's hopefully looks great.
Bonnie, I should have asked you to state your name and address before you asked the question. Thank you. Are there any other questions Ken, you have a question?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. No, I just wanted to add some commentary. So the one thing to keep in mind is that there will be a building permit that will be required. So there will be inspections done through county building permit process. The other thing to keep in mind, however, is that in light of changes through to the Planning Act through Bill 23, those changes that the province have made override your zoning bylaw and official plans. So now effectively, if a property owner wishes to do so, they can have up to 2 additional dwelling units in a building, provided that they are on a site that is connected to municipal services. So there's an equation that they've come up with. So you can have 2 additional units within an existing dwelling, so the existing house, and you can have 1 in a garage. And it's not specific as to how that's done. So it could be that you attach it to a garage, you put it above a garage. As committee is aware, well, as you are aware, Mr. Chairman, as member of council, we have already engaged the public through some open houses late last year about that. We'll be bringing an information report to council about a way forward. But at this point, in all municipalities, the Bill 23 changes are now in effect.
Just to clarify, you said that they have to be attached to municipal services to be able this to happen in our township?
Through your worship, or through you, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. So the way that it was done through Bill 23 was the province, for whatever reason, decided to separate how this is being implemented. So they've done properties that are serviced first through Bill 23. We saw a hint of what they wanted to do with rural properties when the provincial policy statement was released. However, given the reaction of the agricultural community to the severance policies, they've now quickly retracted a lot of it. So the question will be, what do they do for agricultural properties?
Thank you. I just wanted clarification. Connie, you had a question? State your name and address, please.
So through the chair, 911 addressing is done primarily by the county, but there are some aspects to it that are also done by the township. So part of the information report we're going to be bringing to you is to recognize that there needs to be a system to identify where the units are and how they're addressed. So general preview of coming attractions, what we've kind of landed on is any units that are going to be in an existing house, so in an existing dwelling, would be labeled A, B, C, potentially. Anything that's attached to the garage, so if you're putting it attached to or potentially above, and we haven't landed on whether to allow the above part yet, would be an R for rear. And so with the rear unit, what would also be recognized is a need for a 1 meter free and clear pathway to that door, to that unit, so that there's an ability for fire and emergency services not only to, one, know where the unit is, so there'd also be some small signage required to say, you know, unit R this way. We would leave it to a property owner to figure out what's on the sign, but they would have a hard surfaced pathway to then get to the door of that additional unit.
Go ahead.
To the chair, if I may add to what Ken's saying, the unit will still have to be built to code. So this includes any firewall requirements as well.
That's funny. That was my next question. Go ahead, Connie.
So through your worship, or through you, Mr. Chair, when Bill 23 was adopted in November of last year, the province changed the rules for additional dwelling units to increase the number from 2 to 3. And they implemented a series of changes to the Planning Act that override municipal official plans and zoning. So right now, there are we're jury rigging, for a lack of a better term, the rules for accessory buildings if someone was to come forward with an application for a garage. That said, we had recognized that this was coming down the pipe and actually gone out and done a number of open houses late last year, one of which was during your Christmas festival, actually, in that all of the open houses are in this room, and engaged with your citizens and have direction from council to bring a bylaw amendment back to council to actually set some guidelines to finally say, like, this is how it's going to work. To say that it's going to be imperfect is absolutely what's going to happen, because every municipality was given the same set of rule changes as of the end of November. And is still trying to adjust to them, particularly municipalities where these types of units may not have actually been occurring. And so what we've been trying to do is figure out what the best options are. So the information report that we're going to give to council next, I think it's Monday, if I'm not mistaken, is your next council meeting, will be what we've really come up with in terms of just a bullet form, not the actual bylaw itself. There'll be a public meeting that will be required to be held by council. They could make some changes to the regulations, but the hope is to get this ironed out by October in terms of how those detached units can go. In terms of the application that's before committee, most of the regulation changes through Bill 23 actually cover it off. And there was already rules in place for at least one additional dwelling unit already, which is in effect now. So we're kind of jury rigging that process to address this specific application. What we're going to do is kind of amend the process to finally address what Bill 23 is saying.
Here it is, Grace, but, okay, so if someone doesn't have a garage attached or have a place attached to their house, can they still build a garage or?
So through the chair, when you build a house, you are required to have a parking stall for the house. Whether you choose to have a garage as your parking stall or not is your choice. Anyone can build a garage subject to the rules of the bylaw. So there's rules related to the size of a garage structure, how much it can cover on the lot, and how tall it can be and where it can be positioned. But that's solely based on the idea that that garage is never inhabited, meaning it's never habitable space or has a unit in it. What we're going to do is create rules that say, well, now you've added a unit to it, so this is where it needs to be, or how far it needs to be once you start dealing with that. Because the building code has different implications for when a building is built for non-residential purposes or non-habitation versus when it's inhabited.
I was just wondering if more people are going to try to do this, that's all.
Can I, is this really topic for the committee
No,
report here? We're getting off topic here.
Side.
So if you have questions, please feel free to contact Ken or the planning department further to this application. So
Here after.
yeah.
He's got a
Oh, he's gotta go, sorry. We'll give you his card. Sorry.
I'll now ask anybody on the committee if they have any questions. I'll start with you, John Ruth.
No, I'm good.
Dave,
I'm good.
Rob,
I'm good.
when hearing that, there's no further questions. The committee hereby closes this portion of the meeting. Notice of decision will be mailed out within 10 days from the date of the committee's decision. The appeal period is 20 days after the date of the decision is mailed. After that date, if there are no appeals filed, then the application becomes final and the property owner will be sent a notice. Thank you everyone for attending. I'd ask the committee for a decision.
I make a motion, we approve the application as written.
Seconder,
I'll second that.
Rob second it. All in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Hey, John?
Yeah, go ahead.
So can we pick a date when we can do this on-site visit for whoever wants to attend? Or I guess my thought is if we could pick a date when most of us that want to attend could be there and we could meet with John Stratman, would that be proper or not?
Yeah, let's just end the live stream and we'll continue on here. Once
Okay.
we end the live.
Okay,
Thanks who attended live.